Get it, he wasn't with the boy.
You got it, so it's
First,
you're scourged.
not really
We're trying to get them to get it, so
That's how I interpret
visit
it.
with them, so they know what they're supposed to be.
That they were
getting it.
his house.
Well, that's really,
Getting it wet.
it wasn't set up, it was set up for testing.
Yeah.
Not so far for.
Mom is
Right,
just.
like, yeah, it could be, for all I care, it could be a tape.
Are we good?
Yes, here's your YouTube video. Here's the video. They're all freaked out.
All right, so we can call the meeting to order now? Yep. And sorry for the delay, but it's important obviously for us to have the video going before we start a public meeting. So first is about a roll call. Aaron Powell is on Zoom. Brian Grabarski is here. Brian Hafer, Dave Betcher. Dr. Wald indicated she wouldn't be able to attend tonight. Jack Heineman here. Dr. Potoff is hunting, I believe. Kurt Ely's here. Sarah Gex. Valerie Clevenger is on Zoom. Dr. Ranum, thank you. Lauren Bellman. And Jenny Seidler is here. Seidel. Pronunciation. And Dr. Anderson and Randy Gutenberg is the superintendent. So I think we're all here that are supposed to be here today. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if there's any questions, changes, omissions of any sort, otherwise all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And next is we're going to approve the agenda. So all those in favor of approving the agenda, we have 3 items tonight. So a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
And a second by Dr. Anderson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And first we're going to review the progress of the current dashboard data. Randy?
Yep, so just to kind of give you a quick overview of tonight's meeting, when we go back to our previous ad hoc committee, we took a look at our data a few weeks ago. We had a discussion about thoughts with regards to bringing our 3rd and 4th grade students back, that input and kind of reviewing our further data up until last week's board meeting, last Monday. And the board approved at that point, pending kind of a conversation here tonight and review tonight at the board meeting that's following this meeting this evening, to really take a look at our current data as it exists, and also the consideration of bringing our 3rd and 4th grade students back, which is currently approved by the board to happen on the 26th of October. So some of the things that we have continued to do is to work and move forward with some additional nursing services. I know Kurt and Brian have gone through that process and have, I don't know if it's completely affirmed for tonight's meeting, but we feel like we're moving in the right direction with hiring some additional nursing time. And then also the hiring of an additional contact tracer to assist with some of that work. So from an internal processes standpoint, we've continued to take into account the recommendations that have come out of this committee, and the board has been very supportive of helping to move those forward. So Brian and Kurt and Jenny, welcome to our meeting. I know this is your first time you've been able to attend, so welcome as part of our school nursing staff. I just wanted to kind of open it up for just a minute to kind of review anything that we have as updates as far as our internal processes, and then we'll get to our data review in just a moment. So Brian or Kurt or Jenny, anything to add there?
The only update I would say is the contact tracer has accepted the position and is on the agenda for this evening to be accepted by the board. Still in conversation with the nurse that we had offered the position to, and she has shared that she will be communicating back to me tomorrow morning with her decision.
Wonderful.
What's the start date for the tracer?
26th.
The tracer.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
She's out of state at this time.
Oh, all right.
So from an internal process piece, we've been really working hard to get some of those aspects in place. We've also, as the last time we met, we were on the heels of a number of communications coming out from the district with regards to either COVID positive cases or close contacts occurring within the school district. The last number of days, we've not had to report any of those, so I think that's been a positive piece from our standpoint. Certainly those things can change at any moment, but the last number of days, I think our last letter was last Tuesday. So since then, we haven't had anything, and I shouldn't be saying those things out loud because they tend to
Yeah, you may have spoken a little bit too soon.
But that's really the facts that we have as far as kind of where we're sitting here today. I think the conversation we were looking at this evening was trying to take a look at our data that was coming forward. And I know, Kurt, you've probably been the most closely involved with trying to pull that together. So I just want to give you a moment to take a look at the data pieces that we have. And for Aaron and Valerie, I will share our screen here, and I think I'll be able to pull them up so we can all see them.
That folder that you were just covering over. Yep.
Right here. I think the first piece. So this is just an update on some of the data from our district dashboard. Obviously, the items that have asterisks in them, they just don't have a large enough M number for us to report. Anything, Kurt, you'd like to highlight from this chart?
Yeah, I'll just share that since Annie and I completed this dashboard around between 2:30 and 3 o'clock this afternoon, we have actually added 3 more positives to the students and 3 more close contacts to the students. Those 6 cases are all at the high school level. They're students who have not been attending, they're virtual, but they are more cases to add to the chart. What I did with this chart probably since the last time, I don't always remember when I make changes to this because I make some changes as I get feedback from people about what would be helpful. So what is added to this chart, column 4 and column 7 reflect individuals who have cleared. Column 4 is staff who have cleared either isolation or being quarantined. Column 7 indicates students who have cleared being in isolation or quarantine. So you get a sense of how many of those are active now. It's a little difficult because some of those are asterisks and I don't report anything that's less than 5, so you kind of have to probably use the totals to get you an idea of how many people are clearing now. We had a fairly large number of individuals who cleared during last week and actually today, because that was from about 2 weeks ago when we had a spike in activity in our district. We will have a few more students and staff who clear tomorrow, and then another large group that will clear next Monday. So we'll see what happens between now and then to see if we add to that. The other column that I tweaked a little bit, I had reported this previously, and it would be the column that's titled Number of Students Not Attending Due to Symptoms of Illness. What I'm trying to get that column to reflect is the current number of students who are out because they have COVID-like symptoms. They haven't been tested, they haven't, they're not a close contact, but it's students who have come into school, who have shown symptoms of COVID-type symptoms that we are then saying, you shouldn't be in school for a period of time, and we give them guidance on that. So I'm trying to get that column. Previously, that was just an aggregate column, so it showed a lot of, and there's just a lot of illness out there. We've had strep throat. What else have we seen? Strep throat. A lot of allergy type things happening right now. So a nice deep freeze would help us with the allergy piece. But we've seen a lot of vomiting and diarrhea that has been a gastro bug that must be going around. We've seen a lot of that. Within a couple of days, the kid's fine, nothing, they come back to school. So I'm trying to make this column reflect who is currently not coming to school because they have COVID-like symptoms, but they haven't tested positive and they're not a close contact. So I thought that would just be a more valuable piece of information than the aggregate number of kids out with symptoms.
Kurt, can you clarify the numbers? You said you added 3 to the positive case and the close contact piece. Are those ones that we will be needing to communicate out to families, etc.? Or are those still kind of, those are relatively new since you and I spoke?
They are. I don't think we'll need to communicate because those students were not in school.
Okay. Very good.
Question, would it be beneficial when you look at these cases, because you're going to put those 3 cases on this chart, right? The close
Yes.
contact.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Would it be beneficial to segregate that from these are virtual and these are in person? Because really, when you look at this now, you're saying, hey, you know, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the school, and these are virtual.
Yep. I
So-
don't believe it is valuable to do that because the one thing that we've learned through our contact tracing is that virtual kids are interacting with in-person kids. And it's just not a separation in our community. So we have some students who are virtual that we trace back to a student who's in person. And then that in-person student is a close contact or is out now. So I know there's a lot of people in the community who are requesting that, and I get emails about that. I had another email about that today that was forwarded to me, and it just doesn't make sense to me to do that. Now, maybe our medical people would have a different thought on that, and I'm more than happy to do that, but I just know through our contact tracing that there are in-person people interacting with virtual people and virtual people who are interacting with in-person people. So I haven't done that separation just because there's crossover. I mean, I can do it, we know it, but I haven't reported it that way. Just because I think that gives a false impression. That's my personal opinion, but I don't know what others think about that.
I think if you're trying to understand what transmission, I think maybe, Jack, what you're getting at is, I want to know if there's transmission occurring at school, and maybe that would be indicative of that. I think the thing that we found challenging with that is you don't necessarily know. Just because one person gets tested first doesn't mean that that person was the originating infection. And so I would tend to agree with Kurt that it's difficult to in a valid way interpret that data because there's so many unknowns because you can't prove that this person infected this person or this or the other. So I think that would be, I don't know what others think, but they would be challenging.
I agree. Something that we experienced today for really the first time is, as staff, and Jenny maybe can speak to this better than me, I just know it from the periphery, is that we have had some students and some parents not be forthright in the details of what happened. So we've had some tell us that they're not going to share names with us. So now we're contact tracing, but we're probably not as thorough as we could be if people were forthright with the information that they do have available to them based on their experience. Today's the first day that we've experienced that, where people are withholding information from us about close contacts. I don't know what that means, but today's the first day that we experienced that.
The other piece to your point, Jack, is you may have a student who's virtual, who may be involved in some other type of activity at school, who may have had symptoms or things that are aroused at a point where they weren't in contact. They may not be a communication piece that we have to send out, but they definitely fall within different realms of our programs. So you could have a student, for example, who was just gone for a few days and in that process came down with symptoms or something, and that wouldn't necessarily prompt us to have an impact within the school program. Would that be accurate, Kurt?
Yeah.
Very good. All right, I'm going to move on to the next chart, Kurt. This is the one that I believe this is just looking at our Waunakee data. You also have the larger historical chart in front of you. And
Yes,
what we tried to do here was take a look at number of cases per day, looking at your daily positives, 7-day, 14-day, and then the burden rate was really an extrapolation off of some of the Harvard model that we had used just to try to get an example of kind of what's happening and trending. I think a piece that, Dave, you brought up at the board meeting last week was we could anticipate that some of our numbers, particularly some of our burden numbers, would have gone up because we were having some lower numbers come off as we have some higher numbers kind of including in here. So just the nature of that piece kind of brought some of the numbers up when you drop off the 1s and 2s and you're bringing in 4s, 6s, 8s, obviously the 10s and 12s as well. In the next few days, you're going to see an impact of what's going to happen to that 16 as it falls off. So we're really dealing with kind of the volatility of some smaller n numbers as we start to look at what actually happens with the values. But you can at least see the trend lines that are occurring as Kurt has kind of outlined on the larger sheet and tried to articulate here for tonight. So Kurt, you guys updated these this afternoon, so they are as current as we're able to get them.
Yep, they are. I would anticipate over the next 3 days, just because the numbers that will be coming out of the 14-day average are higher, that we'll see, I'm thinking, kind of a flattening of these trends. Again, I don't, you don't really know until you look at the data and you pull the numbers off the state website. But we have a few high numbers that will be coming off of our 14-day average over the next 3 days. So I'm anticipating it will at least be a flattening over the next 3 days. I guess we'll see when we get there.
And then this just shows kind of the Dane County piece as of last Thursday. Is that correct, Kurt?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is as of October 8th. They're always a couple weeks behind, or a week behind. It's their October 8th snapshot is what we use for this one.
So, I guess the piece that we were wanting to bring to the group tonight was one of discussion of really of this data and some of the trends that we're seeing, some of the daily activity that we're seeing generally from our census data over the last week. From I guess when you take a look at some of the 7-day average, it seems like it's been relatively stable over the last few days. I know, Dr. Anderson, when you and I were just talking ahead of the meeting, you had sent one thing that you wanted to discuss was kind of what's happening from the hospital perspective. So I'll give you that opportunity to do that. But from our perspective, we saw at least a flattening of numbers here from the last week as we've made decisions that are moving forward. But obviously the hospitalization piece I know has escalated since we were last together.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm hearing out of this, and I can interested to Bill and others' points who have been involved with this as well. So I think what we had said a couple of meetings ago was looking at internal, do you have the processes and the contact tracing and nursing support One was, transmission within, the district and staff and things, and those both seem to be going okay. I think at the broader community level, I think you're right. I mean, so it's been largely flat. Looks like maybe there's been some increase, in Waunakee, but it's hard with the small ends. The thing that I think is most relevant is if you look at anybody's seen in the news or look at the public health website, hospitalizations in Dane County have gone up from what was a month ago an average in the 25 to 30 range, and even a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago, was in the mid-30s, up above 70. And so that's placing a significant amount of strain on the health systems. It's something that we are accommodating, but there are some downstream impacts, and we talked last time, I think Bill had very appropriately brought up some of the potential secondary impact. And that's not to say that if kids come back to school in 3rd and 4th grade in person, that's going to drive that. But if you saw the press release and other news from Friday, there are potential impacts to non-COVID care and some non-urgent procedures and other things that the health systems are having to take a very judicious, cautious approach around right now. And obviously there's a lot going on around the state that impacts the health systems here in Dane County and surrounding areas. So I just wanted to underscore some of the first 2 buckets I think sound like they're going reasonably. There is a lot of stress in the health systems right now, and I think that's something that the board should just be aware of, and some of that potential impact, because that does have the potential to impact other community members in other facets as well. And I don't know, I'm curious to what others have been involved with or heard or thoughts
So
on.
ours, we just got the email basically saying be ready for it to shut down, not to shut down, but to slow down elective procedures because the hospital is becoming saturated and they don't want to produce the outcome where you can't get care. So we're basically, I think, living in the same pond as far as how much that we just, instead of the panicked event that happened the last time, this is more like, hey, we maybe be ready to taper back your elective procedures. So the numbers is up significantly in our hospital, but the hospitalization is also a trailing number, right? I mean, but we don't know what that means when ours rate of hospitalization has not slowed down yet with the second wave.
Yeah, I mean, we have consistently been increasing, keep waiting for it to go down, and hopefully that it's peaked. It has not peaked yet that we've seen anyway. It's been consistent, I think, across all 3 hospitals at this point. And again, that's not all necessarily, it's not all Waunakee, it's not all necessarily even local. We pull from, surrounding areas as well. But I think it's important context for the board to consider and as you make that decision.
But to your point, we are pulling from maybe the Fox River Valley because they're overburdened and some of these hot spots are coming here to be in our hospitals.
Some of that definitely is happening. I think that has direct impact on people, and I don't want to get into, blame, or I don't think any of us, want any of that. There is persistently elevated, levels of activity in Dane County, and I think part of what you see if you look at the DHS website is you see a big spike in the college-age population in early September. We were all here, we all talked about that, and now you see a normalizing of that where, you look at the UW-Madison numbers, their numbers are very, very low, but the Dane County numbers haven't changed. So a lot of what I think we're seeing now is partly due to the region and is partly due to that different age distribution of cases now that you have that persistent community spread within Dane County and the other surrounding areas.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's one side. I don't think it's just one issue. I think it's multiple things.
I had 5 positives today, so it'll be very interesting. I mean, as far as people reporting and that they have secondary illnesses, because they're my age group people that I take care of, right? So they exist in the community and they're sick. So that's my concerns really. I think the school does a great job. Mine is that we can't overwhelm the hospital can be a problem. St. Mary's is more of a local hospital than the UW, obviously. So we are getting more of our local cases. We do take the other places. I mean, Fond du Lac has its own place and their own hospital, so ours is more of a circle around there. And I also know like Dodgeville and those are also saturated. So there's other places saturated besides. So
I think the
that's
Wisconsin numbers statewide continue to be high. I mean, we really, I think from the health system standpoint, and I'm speaking for myself,
Yeah.
not for UW, but I think we do need to see that number come down, or this is, that daily state count continues to be up around 3,000 when it's not, related to weekend reductions in testing. We need that number to come down.
I just also want to acknowledge, I know at our first meeting, we talked about how effective mask wearing is, and I think, and the district's risk mitigating measures have, and as evidenced in their data, suggests that it's been incredibly effective at keeping these numbers very low. And, I definitely want to acknowledge that, because I think that's a large, important factor. What is happening internally in the school district for risk mitigation is huge, and I'm not, I think that's unique to many other places.
So basically, the board, and I'm sure most of you already know, the board voted last week to begin the process to open 3rd and 4th grade. That would happen in 2 Mondays from now. So it's still 2 weeks away. Tonight, the board will be looking at this committee and this data and deciding if they need to stop the process or continue going. And again, there's always the possibility that depending on which way the numbers go, you might make a different decision 2 weeks from now. But as of right now, that's where we're at. So the board will be taking your consideration, your opinion, your recommendation, whatever you might want to make. And we'll be looking at it in about 25 minutes. So if there's any more comment you want to make about opening, whether you feel there's something we should shift or do, or if you feel anything about what we're doing, I mean, I think your one of the best recommendations so far was pushing the contact tracing, and luckily we were able to hire someone, and that person will basically be on staff by the time we get to that point. So I really would like to hear if there's anything you've seen or heard that we should be doing, whether we open 3rd or 4th or not. Has anything really changed?
Well, for me, I believe I apologize for being first, but I believe there is a local event. I think you guys do a fabulous job. I don't know, I mean, it is fabulous. Mine is, and I think that the 2 weeks from now we'll have another decision, because we'll know whether it curved off on the data or if it's still flying. Locally, at least in my demographic, it is still going up. Mine has always been, as I talked, is it's the mask, and I'm sure Randy told you before, it's like you've basically given the recommendation to everybody who could be in harm's way to get out of the way. I mean, as far as your teachers and your my scenario that I sort of go through as I go is like, hey, are we going to lose 1st and 2nd, 3rd, kindergarten? Is there a risk of losing that because we start the other one? I mean, that is the one, because I think it's very, as you guys do, it's very valuable to keep that going. So that's, I guess I talked too much, but that's my concern, is that you've done such a great job. How do we keep it?
I think big picture, we're all in this kind of community together, and it sounds like a lot of the cases they're getting COVID whether they're physically in school or not.
Right.
And we're lacking that ability to hold people accountable, really, for their behaviors. So really, parents are making the decision outside of the school environment to allow their children to not be masking, not practice social distancing. And even though the school doesn't have any control over that, it's still affecting what we're doing, and everyone's looking at the school under a magnifying glass without acknowledging, all of this huge other piece to the puzzle. And I guess I was doing some reading that there is some question about, kids who are doing virtual, how they're spending their other free time. And are they participating in activities that put them at higher risk for COVID versus being more in a controlled setting like a school where there's expectations and protocols and contact tracers in place to help kind of nip things in the butt right away before they do get out of control. And so I I just think that that really deserves some acknowledgement, at the very least, that this is a piece to the puzzle. I have driven around Waunakee and seen groups of kids playing, and I think that in the past it's been, oh, if you're outside, you're okay, but I don't even know if we can say that anymore. That just being outside, you're probably less risk, but the risk is not zero.
Kurt, you brought up earlier that this is the first time you've had someone withhold contact information, post contact information. Was there a reason given, or was it just?
I don't know, do you know?
I don't know.
I don't think they gave a reason, I just said they aren't gonna, they told the health assistant that they just weren't gonna share any names.
Was that telling the school district or Dane County?
I was telling us.
Told the school district. So Dane County might still be talking to them. Not that we would know.
Possibly. I also know that's happening to public health.
And no matter
Trust
what, they're
results.
2 to 3 days behind. So
They have been. Yeah, we've been able to, as Brian knows, we've been able to get our process done a little bit more quickly than the public health folks, because we've typically heard from public health after we've done our part and kind of know at least what's going on with the school connection. But again, public health is taking a bigger look at this. They're looking at the community. We're just looking at our school. So it's a narrower focus, which probably allows us to get done a little more quickly than what public health can. But, you know, Sarah makes a really good point, is we absolutely can control what happens when kids are in our school environment. And I think all of our staff, from our teachers to our coaches to advisors, have done an outstanding job keeping kids masked, keeping kids social distance. So that's been great. The challenge becomes what happens outside, and that whatever happens outside does make its way in. And as you in the health profession know, you only need one crack and you can have a larger issue. And again, what does that mean for us? I think what that means for us, regardless of how many grades or activities we have in our school, it may mean that on any given day we have to take a pause for a couple of days until we can catch up with our process so that we know the extent of what's going on. So there may be classes or activities or a building or whatever that has to be shut down for a couple of days so that we can do our work to catch up. Right now we've been able to still get everything done within the day that we find out about it. We've been able to do that. And that's going to continue to be our goal, because I strongly feel Mr. Gutenberg needs that information to know what tomorrow can be or what it can't be.
I think a lot of that gets back to the question of, if you bring third and fourth back, you know, we talked in the first meeting, what are those triggers whereby you might need to do that? And I think it goes back to the same things, but probably more on your internal processes. You know, hopefully hiring a contact tracer, you know, if we hear good news about the nurse, you know, those things will help. So, and again, I don't know that there's a magic number, but just, do you have those things in place? And if you go forward over the next couple of weeks, making sure that you kind of know what that trigger to sort of flip the switch would be.
And I think that'll end up being the whole community. It won't just be the school as it goes. I mean, I know at the school, you guys are examining the school. I haven't seen any cases that have transmitted through the school, I mean, to be honest. So I think that's very positive. Most of them, person to person, and most of the time the person knows what happened. I mean, and so then we're like, I mean, not school related. So my concern, I guess, as a representative community here is like, I don't think you're the problem, really. I mean, the problem is here, and how do we control the problem? The whole number is my problem, right? It's not just, you guys are doing a good job. To your point, if they're not doing a good job, then if the community gets, you know, that's how second waves happen, right? Second waves happen because people decide they're okay, or things are okay. And of course, they're not done, right? And we're not done. So I don't know what will happen here. My gut is that it's going up, and if people would wear their masks, then it would flatten out again, and then we would be happier. We'd all be happier with this thing, and it wouldn't be your problem. But I don't see you as the problem. I want to protect the people who are, again, saying it over and over, like, get out of the way. If you're at risk, don't see the people who are that could give you risk. I mean, but the problem is moms and, not moms, grandmas and grandpas want to help their kids, right? So they can get it from their own kids who don't follow the rules, but not just their grandkids. So, too much.
And I think the piece we've talked about with regards to internally is, I mean, the places that you're going to fail, or we're going to have an issue, or we're going to have to shut something down, is just how many stack on top of each other in any one day. I mean, right now, if we have one issue that comes in, and even if it involves contact tracing a dozen people, if that's our issue for the day, depending on what we learn about it during the day, we probably can deal with it. It's a busy day, it's a full schedule, it's a lot to work to do, but we can maybe manage it. If you have 2 of those in one day, that probably isn't. Or if they kind of compound on each other. The other piece comes into, and that's a piece that Brian's been working on, which is just a staffing issue. How much does this impact substitutes and all of those pieces, which he's been working on to try to make sure that we are in a place where we can be the best we can be. And that's going to be a piece as we kind of bring grades back. That'll be an assessment every time we bring another wave of students back to see kind of what's that capacity and are we able to do that. But those are the triggers that are going to potentially shut down a classroom, co-curricular program, or potentially a school. And those are maybe things that we're looking at as hopefully not 2-week shutdowns, but a day or 2 where we can get caught up and then reboot. That's some of the things that we've talked about internally, that we just have to understand that as we go through this, those may and probably will happen at some level or another.
Aaron, you had a comment?
I did. I wasn't sure if that was going to work. Great. Yes. I have a question, actually. The scenario in which we need to close down for a couple of days and switch to virtual for a couple of days because for tracing, is that something that could happen, or is that something that's probably going to happen? If the latter, that's going to be disruptive to the actual service of our clients, teaching. And I don't know if this committee is the right place to consider for that consideration, or if this is just medical, but it's something I think the board should consider. But that said, I still want to answer the question. Thanks.
I think, Aaron, what your question alludes to is how much disruption does continually going in and out from virtual to in-person create from a student's perspective and a teaching and learning perspective. And I think that's a piece that we have to evaluate as they go forward. If it's a piece where we're having the degree of incident that's causing us to do that on a continual basis day to day, and it's kids coming in and out, certainly that's a piece we would have to reevaluate. But I guess sitting here thinking about is there going to be a program, a class, or something that I would anticipate as we bring students back that we may need to take a pause to get caught up? That's probably likely. I mean, even on our local data that we have, I mean, this wasn't a classroom, but we did have a program that we had to shut down for a day just in order to address exactly that issue. 3 of them, Brian, is that right? 3. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Jack?
No, I guess just kind of summarizing, it seems like it would be safer for the kids to be in school, because we're controlling the environment with the masking and things like that, and it would take the kids out of, going to the playground. And with the process and procedures that we've gotten in place, it seems that it's working. you know.
I guess I gotta follow up to that. I mean, but the virtual kids are in school. They're behind a computer in class the same amount of time that they're, you know, for the in-person kids. It's what they do after school anyhow, on a regular year. Kids are gonna get out of the house. So I guess I don't see that much of a difference if the community spread or the spread's coming from activities outside of the academic day. Whether you're in person or virtual, they're still in front of the computer and they're picking it up after school hours or on weekends. So.
Well, I think just to follow up to that, you know, we talk about the education gap. And, you know, we sit around the board table and say, how can we develop equity in education? And I think that educational gap is increasing because there may not be the internet access that, you know, everybody has bandwidth. And, you know, not everybody has the ability to bring the neighborhood groups together. And when you're talking high school versus, you know, elementary school, I think it's different, you know, from a virtual education standpoint.
Are there any more comments or questions or?
I had a question. When will the contact tracer and the new RN start? Will that be in time that process will be fairly fluid or reasonably fluid by the time third, fourth would start? Or are they going to be starting at the same time third, fourth starts?
The contact tracer will be officially starting the same day that the third and fourth grade students will be coming, or would be scheduled to be coming in person at this time. But part of our discussions, or my discussions with that person, is that there is some potential for them to be available for some of the online training that we had planned to use with them before they're actually officially starting here, so that while certainly there will be shadowing work that they need to do with the individuals that are currently tracing, they're not going to be necessarily coming in cold and having to start from ground zero. I cannot speak to exactly when the nurse would start beyond. We have talked about a fairly quick turnaround for that to occur, but until there's an acceptance, there's not an acceptance. So that's to be determined.
Then my question to the physicians or the medical staff would be, because I'm pretty sure you guys are a little tiny on my screen, but I'm pretty sure we have more than physicians, so the medical staff would be, we've talked about having processes in place before we bring the next group back. We're heading into, as I call it, snot season, cold and flu season, along with adding 3-4, along with not fully having these processes up and running potentially. I mean, they're not going to be totally cold, but we're going to be starting that person at the same time. Is there a concern about all of those happening around the same time, or do those timelines sound okay to the medical people in the room?
While you're thinking, let me just share that for the last 3 weeks, or maybe 4, we've been using a substitute nurse. We created a substitute nursing pool, and we've been utilizing that for the last 3 or 4 weeks. 3 weeks? Only 3 weeks. So we've been able to maintain a consistent level of nursing staff in our district for the last 3 weeks. So even when we had a nurse who hasn't been present fully. So I just wanted to share that because we have kind of been operating using some alternate staff from our regular staff. And it's been going okay.
I would also add to that we do have the 6 health assistants in our different buildings right now, and they have been involved in contact tracing with our nurses, with Kurt and with myself. So while we will be bringing in another person or 2 people, they will not be thrown to the wolves and left to their own devices. They will be joining a team to help spread that work out and eventually assume that work.
And I would just say that I think it's really an administrative question, not a clinical one. I think what you've heard from the clinical folks is that you should have the processes in place, and if you feel confident for the volume that you can handle that and you're monitoring it, so I guess I don't think I think that's the issue. It's not a clinical issue for us to necessarily weigh in on.
I think there's never going to be a great time. I mean, after winter is allergy season all over again, and I mean,
Well, if there are no other comments on this section about the opening, there is on the agenda about the flu vaccine clinic. Thanks to Sarah and Ann Lewandowski, who's a community member, who's involved with, her job actually has to do with promoting vaccinations throughout Wisconsin, but she lives in Waunakee. So she's been helping a lot. Basically, what we're tentatively aiming for is October 24th, a Saturday, running roughly from like 9 to 3. We've already got about 4 nurses lined up who will be volunteering to cover. We figure we need probably 2 shifts of 3. The Waunakee EMS is also saying they're going to be involved, and the EMS personnel are able to give shots also. But they'll also be there in case there's any reactions or anything like that, so they'll be on site. Dane County has committed that they will give us, they just said, how much do you want? And you got to pick it up the day before. That's about it. That seems to be their massive requirement. So we're going to try and get an estimate between the school district and Waunakee Neighborhood Connection from their database of their people, which will obviously include a lot of the people who are uninsured or on Badger Care. Once we get that number by the end of the week, we'll be providing that to Dane County, and their only requirement is you have to call them every hour and tell them what the temperature on the cooler is. Other than that, you just turn in what you don't use. Our one hang-up is we were trying to set up to have a private vaccine source that could handle insured people. Unfortunately, Hy-Vee is tapped out. They have 6 large vans that go around and do this, but they're all scheduled all the way out. So we can't get them. Ann is working with some of her private contacts to try to find someone, but it'd be great to have that, but if we can't, then we still do the uninsured people as best we can.
Hometown,
was on the list. A representative from Waunakee EMS is going to be calling in tomorrow to have a meeting about that, and I think he had some additional contacts that we can
there's a variety of.
We have a call tomorrow among most of us planning it, plus hopefully Dane County's going to hop on at 6 p.m. tomorrow night to hopefully finalize most of the logistics parts. And obviously, I think we've got most of it figured out. We're going to handle it at the high school at the same place that they handle the food distribution for the meals from Tauber, since that gives us a good spot for having people park so we can watch that 10 minutes after they get the vaccine. We seem to have the paperwork figured out. There will have to be some data entry into the system afterwards, but the UW Clinics has a form that they normally have people fill out that we can use for that data entry, and we're going to have to figure out a little bit as to who that's going to do that. Dane County kind of said they can, but also seems to be saying they're swamped. So it might be a slow data entry system if they do it. If we find a different way to do it, then we'll go that route. One other question was about, there was one done in La Crosse, and they said a big help was that they had an online scheduling system that people could hop on and sign up for what time they were going to be there, and that helped control the flow a little bit, although they said 2/3 of the people were still walk-ins. You never knew when they were going to show up. So I'm going to have to talk to Randy afterwards and see if the school district can do something with that. We're also checking if there's any way we can do it through another source. That would be helpful, but I don't think it's a deal breaker if we can't get that set up. I really do think it's probably going to be the school and WNC that's really going to drive the numbers anyway. And if we're getting that direct contact with people, we can try and promote, some sort of scheduling if we need to. Other than that, anything else, Sarah? I think most of the other stuff is all going to be coordinated. Again, we hope to have this all figured out by Friday, and then we can have the school district and WNC start contacting. The village has offered to help too. I'm not sure what their database resource would be like, but we'll see. And so the idea would be that the school and WNC are reaching out to people Friday, Monday, Tuesday, something like that, to get ready for that following Saturday.
So the publicity will be through the paper and that's what the village will have, is this online.
Right.
We have everybody pretty much.
We can push it out to our parents, and then we'll make sure we can get it out to some of our social workers, et cetera, who can help to identify some of our families that may need it.
So do you want me to talk to them on the village tomorrow?
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, bring it up. I already warned Todd Schmidt last night in a call for the diversity group. And he said that they wanted to help if they could.
Sounds great.
Other than that, we would need to set a future meeting. So when we're looking at our calendar of school board meetings coming up, and you had the calendar set up of possible segment moving.
So what we had set up previously was we had obviously our meeting tonight. We had also talked about then, we had said, I believe, November 2nd. Is that right, Rebecca?
I believe so.
Now, that would be only a week. If we vote tonight to return the 3rd and 4th on the 26th, that would only be a week later. I mean, to me, I think we would probably want to have a little bit more of a space between that. It could be similarly to how we did this evening, which would be before a board meeting. So I would recommend if we were going to set another meeting, it might be November 9th.
And then do it as a 6 p.m. again?
Yeah.
Right.
If that would be possible.
Would that work for you guys?
As opposed to the 2nd, which then it would at least give you a little bit more information as far as how things are going with the return of our 3rd and 4th grade.
Yeah, because if 3rd and 4th grade did start on the 26th, that would be 2 weeks later then would be the meeting, so we'd be able to look at a 14-day from there.
So that'd be the 9th. Okay, great.
All right, so we'll set our next meeting for November 9th at 6 p.m. Any other questions or anything? And of course, if anyone somehow walks into their office tomorrow and figures out a private source for flu vaccines, give me a call. It really would be nice to do them both together, but we're still going to make headway if we just do the Dane County program.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to use this model as kind of like a guinea pig, and if and when a COVID vaccine does roll out, that we would be able to replicate this process in order to be able to administer that.
Okay.
Would it be a drive-up or a drive-up?
Has to be drive-up.
To that point, is the district in touch with public health or emergency management around the COVID vaccine distribution and what might be included with that?
Yeah, so Waunakee EMS actually seemed very interested in having an emergency ambulance there. We would be able to provide any emergency care.
Yeah, I'm on that committee too, so we can make sure that.
Have fun with that?
Yeah, so let me know. I'm on that EMS committee.
Sure, yeah, I can fill you in.
If there's some, that's what I said, we need.
The temperature.
The problem is if they may be there and then they may not be there. I mean, unless they schedule double that day, so. Or the volunteer staff, because we have.
So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And second by Dr. Anderson. Is there anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And for a bunch of us, stay here for the next meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Dave?